In the far corner of the eclipse sector, there was a planet that no one cared about. It had no cities, no armies, no treasure. Only metal, dust, and silence. And in the middle of that silence, inside a forgotten scrapyard, sat a rusted ship. The ship had no name, no power, no movement. Its hull was cracked, its wings broken, and its inside was filled with rats and rust. No one came close, not because it was dangerous, but because it was useless. Aliens from nearby villages often laughed at it. Just junk, they would say, spitting on the ground, not even worth selling. But one day, a human came. He walked into the scrapyard with slow steps and a heavy backpack. His name was Mason Rigg, an ex-soldier from Earth with grease on his hands and fire in his eyes. He had no money, no ship, no home. Just a dream to build something that would make the galaxy remember his name. Mason stopped in front of the rusted shell. He didn't see junk. He saw potential. He saw bones of an old warrior waiting to be brought back to life. This ship still has a soul, Mason whispered, touching the cold metal. The hull groaned under his fingers. He smiled. She just needs someone to believe in her again. From that day, Mason started working. He made a tent beside the ship, slept on the floor, and ate from a can every morning. He walked into the broken ship, pulling wires, welding metal, drawing plans. He didn't rest. Nearby, a small alien girl named Tavi watched him. She lived on the edge of the scrapyard, stealing scrap to survive. She had sharp eyes and a silent heart. At first, she thought the human was crazy. But day after day, Mason kept working, and one night when she saw him sleeping with oil on his face and tools in his arms, she felt something strange. Respect. Tavi slowly walked closer and left a warm piece of bread near his tent. The next morning, Mason found it, looked around, and smiled. "Thanks, Ghost," he whispered. Tavi didn't reply, but from that night, she came closer. Within a week, she was helping him, silently carrying metal, holding lights, connecting wires. Mason never asked questions, and she never spoke much. They worked like shadows, quiet but full of purpose. The locals began to notice, still fixing that corpse. A fat alien merchant laughed. "She won't fly. Human, give up." Mason only replied with a smile. "She will fly again, and when she does, you'll hear her scream from space." Deep inside the broken ship, something was changing. Power. Lines were being rebuilt, old systems reconnected. The core, silent for years, began to hum. Lights blinked, then stayed on. The ship wasn't just a pile of metal anymore. Mason gave her a name, Ironheart. She may be built from scrap, he told Tavi, but her heart is stronger than any warship out there. Tavi nodded, her hands black with grease. She believed him now more than anyone else ever had. But danger was coming. The nearby warlord, Grak Varn, had spies in every corner. They told him about the human and his growing machine, a junk ship. Grak snorted, let him play. But inside, he felt uneasy. He had learned long ago humans build monsters out of nothing. And so, he sent his first warning. A small gang of raiders was sent to scare Mason. But they came at night, and Tavi saw them first. She lit a flare. Mason woke up, and together they hid inside Ironheart. The raiders laughed, hitting the ship with metal rods. But then a growl came from the engine room. The lights inside the ship turned red. A shockwave burst from the hull, throwing the raiders back like toys. The ship had defended them. Ironheart was awake, not fully alive, not fully ready, but no longer dead. Mason stood in the doorway, smiling with tired eyes. You see, girl, he whispered to Tavi, she's angry. Tavi nodded, her heart pounding. The junk ship had growled, and the galaxy was about to hear her roar. Every morning on that forgotten planet began the same way, dust in the air, metal underfoot, and the distant sound of falling scrap. But for Mason and Tavi, this day was different. Ironheart had made her first sound the night before. A warning growl, a pulse of raw power. It wasn't just noise, it was proof. The old warship was waking up. Tavi stood beside the human as they watched the sun rise over piles of broken machines. She had never seen a ship come alive like that. Not from scraps, not without a full repair crew. But Mason was different. He didn't just fix machines, he understood them. "She's still weak," Mason said, brushing dust off his jumpsuit. "But if she can growl, she can fight." Tavi nodded, saying nothing, her sharp eyes scanning the parts around them. That morning, she brought him a damaged alien power core, stolen from a nearby merchant's bin. It was cracked and unstable. Mason held it up, inspected it, then smiled. "Perfect," he said. "Let's make her hungry." That day began the real work. Mason opened Ironheart's engine room, crawling into spaces barely wide enough to fit a child. He rerouted burnt wires, carved out panels, and used alien parts to strengthen human systems. Tavi stayed close, learning fast, moving tools before he asked. Sometimes he caught her staring at the glowing wires like they were alive. Maybe, in a way, they were. They worked without rest. Mason rebuilt the engines from 5 different ship models. Tavi reinforced the walls with old starfighter plates. Each piece had a story, each dent, each burn mark a memory of a different war. Ironheart was becoming more than a ship. She was becoming a legend, born from leftovers. But not everyone liked what they saw in the nearby trade outpost. Whispers began. The humans building something dangerous. They say the ship kicked raiders off like dust. Is it haunted? No one knew for sure, but Grakvarn, the local warlord, began to worry. Grak sent his eyes in the sky, cheap drones that hovered over the scrapyard. Mason noticed them immediately. He didn't panic. Instead, he waved at the camera, then pulled out a massive cannon core from a junk pile and rolled it into Ironheart with a grin you wanted to see. He muttered, "Then watch this." The next evening, the ship shook again. A deep hum rose from the deck as Mason connected the power core. Tavi stood back, shielding her eyes. The cannon's heart clicked into place. A blue charge lit up. Then, fired into the air, the drone exploded instantly. Smoke curled into the sky. The aliens at the outpost watched the fire in silence. A garbage ship had just shot down surveillance tech worth more than half the city. The message was clear. Ironheart was not a joke anymore. That night, Tavi brought out an old plate from inside. The ship's hull on it was a faded name in human letters. Mason ran his fingers over it. "It says Ravager-class destroyer," he said slowly. Tavi tilted her head, so she was powerful once. Mason nodded. "Maybe too powerful," he whispered. He knew why the ship had been buried. It wasn't just broken, it was hidden. Someone years ago had tried to erase this war machine. But now, piece by piece, it was being reborn. Tavi started painting the name Ironheart on the side using red scrap paint. It dripped, it was messy, but it was real. Mason didn't stop her. "She's yours too now," he said, "not just mine." By the end of the week, Ironheart had 2 working engines, partial shields, and 1 main cannon. Her systems still flickered, and her AI was silent. But her lights no longer died at night. She hummed with power, like a heartbeat in metal skin. The nearby junk scavengers started keeping their distance, some out of fear, others out of respect. They began calling her the ghost ship. Mason didn't correct them. He liked it. Let them fear what they didn't understand. Tavi stayed by his side even when the sun burned her skin and her hands turned raw. She no longer looked like a scared scavenger. She looked like a crew member. Together, they didn't just rebuild Ironheart, they resurrected her, but far away. In a dark room filled with maps and screens, Grakvarn leaned forward. He stared at the footage of the drone explosion. He watched Ironheart's engines come alive, and he clenched his fists. "Send them a warning," he growled. Before that, trash heap grows teeth. The wind howled over the scrapyard that night, dry and sharp like broken glass. Ironheart stood tall under the stars, no longer a pile of rust. She didn't look like a finished warship, not yet, but something about her had changed. She was waking up like a sleeping giant, stretching its limbs. Inside the ship, Mason wiped his hands on a greasy cloth. Tavi sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing with a piece of metal on the ground. The power core now ran steady. The engines thrummed quietly, but Mason knew they needed more than just sound. They needed action. "It's time," Mason said, his voice low but firm. "Time for what?" Tavi asked, though she already guessed. "We test her," he replied, pointing at the sky. "We see if Ironheart still remembers how to fly." They worked quickly, excitement in their bones. Tavi checked the stabilizers, her fingers quick and sure. Mason locked in coordinates for a small jump, nothing big. Just high enough to lift, hover, and land. "Baby steps," he muttered. She hasn't walked in decades. The ship groaned as it powered up. Lights flickered red to green. Panels came alive. Dust blew off the ground as energy built beneath her frame. Nearby scavengers heard the sound and started running. No one wanted to be near if the ship exploded. Mason and Tavi sat in the cockpit, 2 chairs, half-broken screens, wires hanging like vines. Mason looked at her. "Ready?" Tavi nodded, eyes wide. He pressed the ignition with a deafening roar. Ironheart lifted. Not fast, not clean, but real. She rose 10 meters above the scrapyard, hovering like a wounded hawk. Tavi gasped, holding onto the side. They were flying. Not in space, not through stars, but they were off the ground. Below, the junkyard trembled, sending old parts rolling away. A few alien merchants watched from a distance, mouths open. "She moves." One whispered, "The junk ship moves." Mason grinned, sweat on his forehead. He guided her forward slow. Clunky steps through the air. It felt like driving a dying truck. But it was working. "Okay, girl, let's bring you back down," he whispered to the ship. The landing was rough. One leg hit too fast. The ship tilted. A side panel fell off with a loud clang, but they landed. Ironheart had risen and come down without breaking. Tavi laughed, jumping out of the cockpit. "She flew," she shouted, arms in the air. "She's real." Mason leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "She's alive," he whispered. She passed her first test, but they weren't alone. At the edge of the yard, shadows moved. A group of raiders stood watching, 10 strong, armored in rusted suits. Carrying black market weapons, they had been sent by Grak Varn. Not to kill but to send a message. The leader stepped forward. Raising his rifle, "Nice fireworks, human," he shouted. "But this land belongs to Grak." He stepped closer. Boots crunching metal, and Grak says, "No more flying junk." Mason didn't respond with words. He walked up the ramp and entered the ship. Tavi followed without question. The raiders aimed their weapons, ready to destroy Ironheart before she could become a threat. Inside, Mason flipped switches, shields. He asked. Tavi checked. "Partial," she replied. 30%, weapons. 1 cannon online. "That'll do." Mason smiled. The raiders stepped closer, laughing now. "Come out before we burn your ship down," one of them said. Suddenly, the cannon on Ironheart's side turned. Its old joints cracked and hissed, but it aimed with purpose. Red lights glowed on its surface. "Last warning," the leader said. Then the cannon fired. A blast of energy burst forward, hitting the ground right in front of the group. The explosion sent half of them flying into the air. The rest scrambled for cover, screaming, "One shot." Just one, and chaos followed. Ironheart growled again. Like a beast waking up from a long nightmare, her shields shimmered, weak but visible. She wasn't finished. but she was dangerous. The survivors ran, leaving behind weapons and pride. Mason and Tavi stood at the ship's entrance. Smoke curled from the barrel of the cannon. Tavi looked up at him. "They'll come back," she said. "I know," Mason replied, "but next time we'll be ready." That night, Ironheart stood like a sentinel over the scrapyard. Scavengers kept their distance. No one called her junk anymore, and far away. Grakvarn slammed his fist on the table. "The human thinks he's a builder," he growled. "Then let him build a coffin." Ironheart didn't sleep that night. The ship stood. Quiet lights glowing under her rusted armor. Guns twitching with the memory of battle. Tavi couldn't sleep either. She sat near the cannon, staring at the stars, her hands still shaking from the blast. Mason worked in silence. He was tired, but he couldn't stop. Every bolt, every wire he tightened meant one more second Ironheart could survive. "She's not ready," he whispered, "but she's not weak anymore." News of the test spread fast. By morning, every corner of the Eclipse sector was buzzing. A scrap ship had flown, fought, and survived. And Warship was under human hands. In the dark palace of Grakvarn, a new order was signed. Not just a warning, not just fear, but a bounty. 10,000 credits. He growled, for the ship or the corpses. Every mercenary in the region smelled blood. Some came for glory, some for the challenge. But most came for the money. All of them underestimated Ironheart. The first ship arrived at dawn. A sleek silver raider called Black Fang. It hovered low over the scrapyard, sensors scanning for weak spots. Inside, a female alien bounty hunter. Name Krell smirked. "Let's scrap the scrap," she said, loading her plasma launcher. Mason spotted the ship from the cockpit. "We've got company," he muttered. Tavi ran to the panels, hands moving fast, shields still recovering. She said, "Weapons ready." Mason didn't wait. He flipped the COM switch and opened a channel. "This is private ground," he said calmly. "Back off or be buried in it." Krell laughed from her seat. "You built this from junk, human," she replied. "I'll enjoy turning it back into pieces." Ironheart fired first. Twin railguns lit up the sky. Missing by inches, but loud enough to shake the air. Krell jerked the controls, dodging hard. But she wasn't afraid. She dove straight toward the ship, launching fire from her cannons. The scrapyard exploded in sparks and smoke. Tavi screamed, grabbing Mason's arm. But Ironheart stood tall. The blast tore away outer layers, but the core stayed strong. Mason hit back with a short burst from the top turret. The shot clipped Black Fang's wing. The ship spun, flames trailing behind it. Krell cursed, trying to regain control. Ironheart aimed again. One more blast and Black Fang was down. The raider crashed into the dirt outside the yard. Engines hissing, Krell crawled out, wounded, defeated. She stared at Ironheart as if it had betrayed the laws of nature. "It's just junk," she whispered. Before collapsing, Mason didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning. For every hunter they stopped, 10 more would come. Tavi walked beside him, eyes burning. "Why do they all hate us?" Mason looked at her, then up at the sky. "Because we took what they threw away," he said, "and we made it better." The next day, 2 more ships came. By night, 3 more followed. They attacked in groups, small, fast, deadly. But Ironheart adapted. She remembered each trick, blocked each path, and Mason. He learned faster than any machine. Soon, the bounty doubled. 15,000 credits, then 20. Grakvarn was growing desperate. But something else began to happen. Something no one expected. People started talking. Scavengers, broken soldiers. Exiles all. Those who had been thrown away by the galaxy. They watched Ironheart fight back, and they whispered, "If the human can do it, why can't we?" Mason didn't know it yet, but Ironheart had become more than just a ship. She was a symbol, a message, that the forgotten weren't useless. That scrap could become strength. Tavi noticed it first. A group of dirty kids at the scrapyard gate. Watching silently, one of them carried a broken drone. "Fix this," he asked, holding it out. Mason took it, nodded, and said, "Sure, but next time, bring snacks." They laughed. For a moment, it felt like home, but far above, in orbit, a new threat waited. Grakvarn had sent a real hunter now, a ship called Oblivion's Tooth, crewed by killers. Their mission wasn't to warn or chase. Their mission was to end the story. The stars above the scrapyard were not quiet anymore. Every night, more ships came. Some came with weapons, others with questions. Ironheart had become something no one expected, a signal of change. But Mason Rigg was tired. Tavi saw it in his eyes. He smiled less, spoke little, and spent long hours inside Ironheart's control room. He wasn't just fixing the ship anymore. He was preparing for something bigger. One morning, she found him recording a message. His voice, calm but cold. "This is Mason Rigg, former soldier of Earth, keeper of Ironheart," he said. "You gave us your trash, your broken parts, your dead machines. But we made something powerful, something that fights, something alive." Tavi leaned on the doorway, silent. Mason didn't. "Stop. This ship is not a threat unless you make it one. But if you keep coming, if you keep sending killers," he stared into the camera, "then you'll see what scrap can really do." He ended the message and pressed send. It traveled through hidden satellites and bounced across the system. Within hours, it was everywhere. Pirate stations aired it for fun. Outposts played it in bars. Even deep space colonies heard the human's voice. And in the high tower of the Galactic Council, ambassadors watched in silence. Ironheart wasn't just a ship now. She was a challenge. The response came fast. Ships were sent to observe. More mercenaries showed up. Grakvarn screamed in rage when the broadcast hit his screen. "That fool dares to speak like a king," he shouted. "Then he'll die like a beggar." But Mason didn't wait for death. He knew the rules were broken. They couldn't just hide anymore. So he did the unthinkable. He flew Ironheart, not far, not fast, just to the edge of the nearest orbit station, a known council meeting post. The station was armed, patrolled, and protected by 3 elite guard ships. Mason didn't come to fight. He came to show. Ironheart hovered near the station. Calm, quiet, floating like a ghost. Tavi sat beside Mason in the cockpit, holding her breath. "This is crazy," she whispered. Mason smiled. "Good," he said. "Let them see how crazy scrap can be." Within minutes, the station opened communication. "Identify yourself," a cold voice said. Mason pressed the button. "Ironheart," he replied simply. "I just wanted to say hello." The guards warned him to turn back. They locked weapons, raised shields, but Ironheart didn't flinch. Her weapons stayed cold. But her systems were scanning everything, learning. Watching, Tavi stared at the guard ships through the window. "They're scared," she said softly. Mason nodded. "They should be." And then, he pressed the next command on every nearby frequency. Screens came alive with Mason's earlier broadcast. Even the guard ships saw it. Every worker, every commander, every visitor watched the human. "Speak. You sent us junk," he said again on the screen. But now, that junk has teeth. It wasn't a threat, was a promise. Mason cut communication, turned Ironheart slowly, and left. No shots fired, no damage done. But the message was clear. Ironheart was here, and she wouldn't bow back. In the scrapyard, things changed. More scavengers came not to fight, but to learn. Broken droids, busted engines, cracked ship's all brought to Mason. Tavi trained children how to weld. Mason taught ex-soldiers how to rebuild. Ironheart had become more than a war machine. She was a movement, a dream for the broken to rise again. But high in orbit, Oblivion's tooth arrived. Its hull black as space, engines silent, guns warm. This wasn't a bounty hunter ship. It was a killer, built to destroy worlds. And its captain had only one order-eliminate Ironheart. No warning, no words, just death. Tavi saw the shadow first. A shape above the clouds, different from the others. Heavier, colder, Mason, she whispered. Her voice shaking, he looked up, and his eyes narrowed. This isn't a test. He said, this is war. Oblivion's tooth did not announce itself. It did not hail or flash its lights. It simply appeared huge, dark, and silent like a shadow that swallowed stars. Even the sky above the scrapyard seemed to darken under its presence. Tavi stood frozen, watching it from Ironheart's ramp. She had seen raiders and mercenary ships before. But this was different. This was not just another bounty hunter. This was a ship built to end things. Mason didn't panic. He moved fast, steady, focused. He sealed the hangar doors, activated the emergency systems, and pushed power to full shields. We're not dealing with cowards now, he said quietly. They came to bury us. Ironheart rumbled, her core pumping harder than ever before. The shields flickered to life. Stretching like blue wings across the hull, Tavi ran to her station, flipping switches with trembling hands. Mason, she whispered. They've locked on, he nodded. I know. Oblivion's tooth fired first. The blast tore through the sky, hitting Ironheart's shield with enough force to shake the entire scrapyard. Parts exploded. Sand flew in every direction. The outer shield buckled. But it held. Inside, lights flickered. Warning alarms screamed. Mason gritted his teeth. He slammed the fire control system online and activated the main turret. Return fire, he ordered. Ironheart screamed. The cannon rebuilt from 5 different wrecks unleashed a beam of energy that shot into the clouds. It hit the side of Oblivion's tooth, scorching its armor. Not enough to break it, but enough to make it bleed. The massive ship pulled back, then sent 3 smaller fighters speeding toward the yard. Fast, sharp, and heavily armed, Tavi tracked them, her fingers moving faster than ever. Targeting, she muttered, locking. Firing Ironheart's side guns rotated with a metallic hiss. Twin blasts lit up the sky. One fighter exploded instantly. The other 2 swerved hard, but Ironheart was faster. She clipped a wing, then spun, surprising them. One of the raiders crashed into the dunes. Burning, the other retreated, engine trailing smoke. Tavi let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. We're still here, she whispered. Mason gave her a short nod, but Oblivion's tooth wasn't finished. It opened its belly and launched a wave of plasma missiles, each one guided by AI, designed to break through shields. Ironheart's systems screamed in warning. Tavi's hands flew over the controls. Activating countermeasures, she shouted. Mason dove to the manual override, pulling switches that hadn't been tested yet. Dozens of Ironheart's hidden ports opened, firing decoys and flares. Some missiles chased the false heat, others struck dirt, but 3 of them hit. The explosion was brutal, tearing off the starboard armor, sending the ship spinning. Sparks flew, panels blew off the walls, smoke filled the bridge. Tavi coughed, shielding her face. Mason, she cried. Shields are failing. He pulled her down, covering her with his body as another shockwave hit. But even in pain, even under fire, Ironheart refused to die. Mason rose, bloody lip, burned shoulder. He slammed his hand against the side of the console. You're not done, he said to the ship. I didn't build you to fall. The ship groaned, lights blinking in strange rhythm. Then something new, a hidden system activated. One Mason hadn't even wired. It was ancient, deep within the ship's core. From the war she'd fought long ago, Ironheart's main gun began to glow. With a red pulse, a sound like a drumbeat echoed through the hull. Tavi stared at it. "Why died? What is that?" Mason blinked. I don't know." The gun fired itself, a massive beam, pure red, slicing through the sky like a sword. It hit Oblivion's tooth dead center. The massive ship shook violently. For the first time, it moved backward. Its front section cracked open, flames bursting through its inner walls. Inside Ironheart, Mason just stood there. The ship was doing things he hadn't programmed. She was awake, not just as a machine, but as a force. The enemy tried to retreat, but Ironheart didn't stop. She launched everything: turrets, missiles, beams. She chased Oblivion's tooth out of the sky like a wolf chasing a wounded beast. And finally, with one last shot, Oblivion's tooth exploded. Flames rained down on the junk planet. Tavi stared through the cracked glass, tears on her face. Mason didn't cheer. He just placed a hand on the console. "Good girl," he whispered. "You remembered who you were." Outside, the scavengers gathered again. Not to laugh, not to mock, but to witness Ironheart. Ship they once called Junkhead just destroyed a warship feared across 5 systems. The war had begun, but for the first time. The galaxy saw the human ship not as a joke, but as a threat. The wreckage of Oblivion's tooth still burned in the sky. Its metal bones fell across the horizon like shooting stars all across the eclipse sector. Signals flashed, sensors screamed, and broadcasts exploded with a single truth: the junk ship had won. Ironheart returned to the scrapyard slowly. Like a beast coming home after battle, smoke curled from her broken wing. Sparks flew from cracked plates, but her engines still glowed. Her heart still beat. She wasn't pretty, but she was alive. Mason limped out of the cockpit, one arm in a sling. Tavi walked beside him, face smudged with oil, cuts across her cheek. They stood at the edge of the yard, watching the sky rain fire. No one spoke for a while. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within minutes, a crowd gathered: scavengers, kids, traitors, even old enemies. They had all watched from afar. And now they came to see with their own eyes. Ironheart stood behind Mason and Tavi, smoke rising from her frame. She didn't look like a warship. She looked like a survivor, and that made her dangerous. A small alien boy walked forward, holding something in his hands. It was a rusted star badge, long forgotten, dented, and dull. He held it out to Mason. "You're the captain now," the boy said. Mason didn't smile, but he took it and pinned it to his chest. Tavi looked up at him. "What happens now?" she asked. Mason didn't answer right away. He watched the flames fade in the sky, then said, "Now the real war begins." In the days that followed, Ironheart's name spread faster than any ship. Not through official channels, but through whispers, stories, and stolen transmissions. They said a human had rebuilt a ship from trash. They said that ship had killed a ghost fleet. They said she couldn't be stopped. In council halls, ambassadors fought with red faces. "Send a fleet," one shouted. "She's just a machine." Another argued, but deep inside, even the proudest races felt a tremble. Because they hadn't been beaten by an empire, they'd been beaten by a man with nothing. Ironheart became a beacon all across the outer systems. People who had been cast aside began to rise. Old ships were pulled from dirt. Broken robots were repaired. Scavengers became crews. Farmers became fighters, and everywhere they flew. They painted her symbol a red heart wrapped in wires. They didn't call it rebellion. They called it rebirth, back on the junk planet. Mason stood on top of Ironheart, looking down at the growing camp below. Shacks had become homes. The scrapyard had become a base. Ironheart's shadow touched everyone there. Tavi walked up the ramp, holding a datapad, another message. She said, handing it to him. He read it in silence. Another system, asking for help, another group ready to fight back. Mason sighed. He hadn't wanted this. He'd only wanted to build something that mattered. But now, he'd become a symbol. Tavi leaned beside him. "You regret it?" She asked. "No," Mason said softly. "I just didn't think a broken ship and a broken man would change the galaxy." She smiled. "Sometimes." Broken things cut the deepest. Suddenly, a sound echoed in the ship, a hum, low and steady. Mason turned fast. That sound wasn't coming from the engines. It was coming from the core. He and Tavi ran inside. The control panel blinked to life. The main screen lit up with a new message. 3 words, written in red. "I am ready," Tavi gasped. "The AI," she whispered. Mason stared at the words. What? He hadn't finished the AI system, but the ship had. Ironheart wasn't just learning, she was becoming. More words appeared. More are coming, stronger than before. "I will protect." Mason swallowed hard. He placed a hand on the console. "You're not just a ship anymore, are you?" No reply came, only a soft pulse of red light, like a heartbeat. Outside, the wind picked up again. A storm was coming this time, not of dust, but of war. But Ironheart stood tall, her scars glowing like armor. No longer a secret, no longer a myth. She was a legend, and legends don't rust, they rise.